Hey, what's going on, all you monsters and humans out there? I'm Duuz-Diz-Din coming at you with another episode review of Star vs. the Forces of Evil. This time it's episode 10. The first half I'm talking about is Cornball, where we actually see the return of Buffrog after all this time, after he fled from Muni in the wake of the breakdown of any possible form of relations between monsters and humans. But Star brought him to Muni as a bit of a surprise for a game of cornball. And we also see that they were able to get him here front row seats with an invitation from Meteora, who has Eclipsa, I should say, who has, basically spends most of this episode looking for Meteora, who just kind of escapes for most of the episode. But Star is, basically trying to use this game of cornball as a way of bringing Buffrog back to Muni, as Star's kind of using this as a way of testing the waters of showing the change in how humans see monsters and vice versa, as this will be a completely integrated game, basically. However, it doesn't quite look that way to Buffrog, as he feels that ultimately the monsters and humans will stay opposed to each other. But he decides he'll give this game a chance, if only just for Star, to see what actually can become of it. We also see that Buffrog's children have all actually grown fairly large. Even the smallest one, Catellia, who is absolutely ecstatic for this game, as she has been very much looking forward to it, just like her dad. It kind of runs in the family, this, feeling of wanting to kind of be in this moment. We also see that Kelly and Marco are actually doing the commentating for this, although Marco has basically no real knowledge of how this works. Doesn't actually have any real information or anything like that in regards to what exactly what goes on in cornball. So Kelly brings out her own little bit of a rule book, basically, but it's like super thick, like dummy thick. But it shows that she's really stepping up and willing to kind of teach Marco what he needs to know when he needs to know it. However, Marco states that when he asks why he's not down with Star, he states that after the whole Blood Moon Army thing, he's kind of been able to move away from it. He's no longer kind of bound by like wanting to be with Star. Meanwhile, the game starts to begin between the monsters and humans. Basically just showing, getting underway what Star hopes will be a very integrated game. But as time goes on, Star starts to kind of, notice something kind of terrible for the most part. Something that shows that it's not really going in the direction that she wanted it to go, as most of the monsters end up picking monsters, and most of the humans start picking humans, which Buffrog kind of figured would happen in the end. And Star tries to, very volatile, in a volatile way, tries to call them out on not, being integrated and trying to force things for the most part. But, both sides are completely unwilling to budge. And Meteora ends up being no help as she's too preoccupied. I said Meteorian. Eclipsa ends up being no help as she ends up chasing Meteora around. Meanwhile, we see that Katrina ends up being kind of, starts befriending this Mumin child, and they kind of sneak off to play their own actually fun game of cornball. Meanwhile, Star tries her best in order to integrate everyone together through their mutual love of cornball, only for, a fight to kind of break out into the stands with arguments and stuff over who loves cornball more and who invented it and all that good stuff. Only for us to see that more and more children are sneaking off to play a game of their own. And Star tries her best to kind of quell this argument going on in the stands, but even when she just bubbles people up to keep them away from each other, they just start blaming each other for being bubbled. And Star starts to blame the teams on the field, and they just start fighting on top of that too. And Buff Frog's just like, no, it is what it is. This is why we left. We're not surprised, and all that good stuff. And when Star goes to Eclipsa to, continue to ask for help. And honestly, to a certain degree, it kind of shows that, ultimately, Eclipsa's not the greatest queen, honestly. No, not to put her down, but it's just the fact that she's no help here. She's lost her daughter. There's nothing going on here that, helps Eclipse standing for the people, as she just kind of brushes this off looking for Meteora. And, Buff Frog kind of reiterates this point in the fact that he's just like, look, if a war breaks out here, if an outright battle between monsters and humans start here, I don't want my children anywhere near here. And as he tries to, get all his children together to go, he's informed by two of them going off to play a game of cornball on their own, that they're, all of the kids have just gone off to have their own fun time. And, Star, Eclipsa, and, Buff Frog all see all these kids, monsters and humans, having a good time and playing together. And meanwhile, Marco, who's been just burning through all the information on cornball that he can, ends up gazing upon, through the window what's going on, and mistakes it for the real game and starts commentating on it. And all the other, parents and guests and all that end up seeing this sight of all the kids playing together, having fun, no fighting between them, just sportsmanship and all that good stuff. And the parents of the kids start to kind of bond over this fact, and embracing the fact that their kids are having fun and being very well mannered to each other. And we even see Meteora just chilling with other kids and all that good stuff, just having fun. And this just continues on. Everyone just gathers around, just having a good time seeing these kids play. And we even see Katrina just doing her best, having a good time, having fun, which is the biggest thing for Buff Frog. And she ends up, as Kelly comes back and starts taking over commentating, we see that Katrina starts to actually move in to score the final goal, only for it to, the way that it's scored makes no sense, and even Marco just kind of completely gives up on trying to understand how this game works. But with a score of the final point, they all shake hands and are just like, yes, you did it, well played, good game, GG, GG. And at first, even the humans and monster parents come in and comment on how well their children do. But once their races start to come into play, arguments break out yet again. And Star's just like, it was a start, but baby steps. And she goes over to Katrina, who seems a little bit down over the fact that, she would have liked to play more, but now that they'll just be going back to the dimension they were living in, she probably won't get to play another game. But Buff Frog says they'll be moving back to Muni, if only just to, give them a chance to be happy and make friends and all that good stuff. With, Buff Frog saying that though their generation might be garbage, as he puts it, that doesn't mean the next generation will be, and they should be free to make the choices for a better world, which is super topical. Like, my god, just very, very topical. And that ends the episode, first A plot of episode 10, called Cornball. We then move into part B, called Meteora's Lesson, where we see that Eclipsa is practicing her pigeon, as she will be meeting with Rich Pigeon and the rest, and apparently this is showing off that the relations she had with the spider bites are actually starting to develop. She's starting to gain more traction in the world of politics for the most part. And while she's away, Jana will actually be babysitting Meteora, who, isn't being babysat by Marco because she can't hear the name Marco, and just she's filled with rage immediately, showing that while she might not have her memory, she still has that emotional reaction. But as soon as Eclipsa leaves, we see that Jana's idea of babysitting is just playing games on her phone for hours on end. But, we also see that Glossaric has been meeting with Meteora on the sly. And we see that Glossaric has a broken arm for some reason, and a very silly looking hat. He's also been trying to teach Meteora how to dip down, but it hasn't quite been working out. So he takes her on a journey for a lesson, where we see that, Glossaric can create portals without the use of dimensional scissors, but dimensional scissors come from Hekapoo, who can naturally, create portals. So, and Glossaric is the creator of every member of the Magical High Commission, Hekapoo included. Meanwhile, Jana is completely unaware of anything that's going on. And we see that, Glossaric has come to meet with Father Time, but he is nowhere to be found. So Glossaric has no choice but to go to the River of Time to meet up with its ferryman, Ronaldo. And we come to find out that Ronaldo is one of Glossaric's sons, a former member of the Magical High Commission. And Ronaldo desperately wants to be back with the Magical High Commission. But, Glossaric says that ultimately he doesn't control what the Magical High Commission does. Much to the disappointment of Ronaldo, who was ultimately kicked out over the fact that he talks in rhyme. Like, even Glossaric can't stand him talking in rhyme. Which, it's just like, yo buddy, if you just stop talking in rhyme, you might be able to just smooth things over with your family. But we see that Glossaric arrives a little too early, as he arrives at the arrival of the first settlers of Muni, or possibly the first humans on the face of Muni. Because they're coming out of the River of Magic, basically. And, they have no memory because of the magical contamination. So Glossaric gives them the abridged history of the Muni using the picture book I think we saw all the time ago during, I think it was Mutapendence Day, the Mutapendence Day episode, where we really started to learn about the history of the human people. But he tells them all about their history, what they'll do, everything leading up to their future and all that good stuff. We even see him dip into the pool of magic, take out a baby unicorn, which is used to form wands, and we see the creation of the very first magic wand using Meteora's rattle and this unicorn, and seeing it bestowed upon the very first queen of Muni, which, Glossaric just picked choosing eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So ultimately, I don't believe this is coincidence or Glossaric, changing the timeline by accident or something. I feel that this was ultimately something that was always destined to happen because Glossaric never does anything by accident. There's always some greater meaning behind everything that he does. So I feel that he did this because he knew that ultimately there would be a greater, lineage for this. We also know that the wand takes on the form of a rattle whenever it finds a new bearer who is usually a child until she can grow into it. So that gives the basis behind the wand as a whole, which is very fascinating. I feel like we kind of yada yada over this whole situation as we even see the creation of Stump Day. Like, what? And it feels like we just yada yada over it, but at the same time, it makes sense that Glossaric would have been involved with this from the very beginning. Although it then brings in the question of how Glossaric came into creation and, came into being the mentor for the, Butterfly Royal family. Um, so, Glossaric has Ronaldo take them to the actual time that Glossaric wanted to go, to the age of butterflies, when we see a younger version of Toffee starting to try to rally up the Septarian race in their fight against the butterflies. And it's also made known by Glossaric that he got his arm broken by Toffee, which immediately enrages Meteora, but she's unable to do anything against Toffee. And as Toffee goes to break Glossaric's other arm because he's just a dick like that, he notes that Glossaric does end up saying that, Toffee is just misguided to a certain extent, and that he just needs to learn a lesson, not just Meteora. As Meteora shows off her soul stealing, powers using her dip down. And while it does initially start to steal Toffee's soul, Glossaric tells her that's enough. But, the fact that he doesn't completely have his soul, removed from his body shows the innate power from Toffee. But, Toffee ultimately uses this as a way of, gaining more sympathy towards his cause of taking down the butterfly family line because he has, he just has this distaste for magic inherently, which I feel needs to have a greater explanation put behind it. But Glossaric ends up saying that ultimately Toffee never truly learns, and that this is another lesson for Meteora in the end. And as Eclipsa ends her discussion with Rich Pigeon, which I think went okay. It doesn't seem like it went badly. Meteora has been returned and all that, and she even says "dead down," which Eclipsa thinks is her saying "daddy." And we see that Glossaric was kind of faking the fact that it was a more permanent injury in order to gain sympathy from Meteora for the most part. But he ultimately says that magic will be in good hands, showing that, ultimately, while Star might not be the next purveyor of magic, I feel that ultimately Star will be the one to kind of help groom Meteora into the next Queen of Muni and the next ruler of magic as a whole. So, a very interesting and weirdly informative episode all around. Just for honestly, the stuff with the blood moon and the relationship triangle between Tom, Star, and Marco. Honestly, it wasn't quite gelling with me for the most part. Even the stuff with the Blood Moon Ball and all that wasn't quite gelling with me for the most part. Not bad, just not as exciting as I thought it would be. But the stuff here revolving around, the next generation of Muni and all that good stuff. Very interesting. And the comments that Glossaric make toward Toffee, and the fact that it was obvious they've met a few times before this, just really brings out a lot of questions and really gives weight to the fact that Glossaric, and Toffee had this history together, and Glosseric's statement that he doesn't have a side, even though he doesn't seem to quite favor Toffee for the most part, but he ultimately seems to feel that Toffee is necessary to a certain degree, which raises a lot of questions as to if Toffee should return, what role will Toffee end up playing? And what will happen with Meteora? Will we see her grow into a older state with a bit of a more widened vocabulary? God, I can't say words. Or will she continue to remain a small child? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you like this review, feel free to leave me a like. And if you didn't, feel free to leave me a dislike and tell me what I did wrong in the comment section below so that I might better myself for future videos. And subscribe, because I'll definitely continue to bring you more magical and revolutionary episode reviews of Star vs. the Forces of Evil. And if you wish to find me on any social media platforms, feel free to just Google Duuz-Diz-Din. I'm everywhere. And until next time, stay magical.